My name's Catherine, and I hated everything about Sad Perfect by Stephanie Elliott. Up front, there are going to be trigger warnings for anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and mental distress, as well as mishandling of mental health rep in books. So, up front, there you go. This book was a 1-star read for me. No offense to anyone if you loved this book or thought this was great mental health rep. But in my opinion, Stephanie Elliott really wrote a caricature of mental health representation. And I think that not only is it just bad, just completely inaccurate, but I think it's also, it's a negative, it's written in a way that makes, if I had read this when I was 13 or 14, back when I was really sick, it would have really impacted my psyche. It would have made me feel bad, and it would have, if I had had to go into inpatient care, it would have really affected my mind frame on that. And I think that that is dangerous. I don't think that's appropriate. Hi, I'm filming a book review. Stephanie Elliott has a daughter who has dealt with AFRID, which is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, previously known as selective eating disorder, and she takes that experience and then runs with it through the meadow of every other eating disorder and mental illness. And honestly, this book really pissed me off. I understand that she wrote this to cope with her daughter's eating disorder, and I'm sure that that was a very difficult experience as a parent to watch your child go through that. It's a horrible thing for anyone to have to go through, and I hope that her daughter's doing really well. But she's so judgy about every other eating disorder in this book. It's discussed that there's she has her, the main character, her name is P, but that's not really her name. But we never learn her name, so I'm going to call her P. She, towards the beginning when she's diagnosed with AFRID, they talk about how she actually has things in her mouth, her taste buds and her insides of her mouth that make things taste bad and weird to her and cause gag reflex. And to me it felt because there was a physical aspect to P's eating disorder, P felt like it was more difficult to deal with and more valid and made her less crazy than other people who anorexics and bulimics. And honestly, she kind of says that straight out. She says, someone is talking to her, she goes to this group therapy with all these other girls who have eating disorders, and she's like, I have a monster inside me. And one of the girls oh, Ed, which is what a lot of people with eating disorders call their eating disorder, because it really does feel separate from you. And she's like, no, picture Ed, but +1. Picture Ed, but worse. She totally lays into these girls at one of their group therapy sessions about how how she has it so much worse than them. She's you can't even imagine what I've been through. Just, she goes on and on about it, and then she's like, well, I showed them, and then she's like, yeah, and they listened to me, and they understood, and they smiled at me, and they hugged me. And first of all, I can promise you, if some kid came into group therapy and was mean and awful about other people's disorders, first of all, the group leader does nothing. Therapy is a non-judgmental space. You can't say that shit, okay? That's just not acceptable. But also, I can assure you that none of those girls would have been like, oh, I understand. No one would have said that. Everyone would have been like, who's this kid who thinks that she's better than us? Because that's honestly how it comes across. I tried really hard to like this book because I've never read anything about people with AFRID before. Honestly, I'd never even heard of it before I picked this book up. And I wanted so badly to like it, but it reads as a caricature of a mental health book. So this when I was reading it, I couldn't put my finger on it until I got to the last page, closed the book, and I was like, this feels like something who was written by someone who was in the middle of being very sick. Someone who is blinded by their disorder. Someone who really just, like a 14-year-old Wattpad piece. It reads like there was no filter, they weren't, like Stephanie Elliott wasn't aware this was going to go out to people. They really, oh my god. So she goes to an inpatient facility. She calls it the whole time the crazy house. Just the whole time. Talks about how awful it is. She makes it into this like absolute like joke of a place. She's locked in solitary. A boy kills himself on her floor at a facility, and she's like, how can I trust that I'll be safe if like he was able to kill himself? And she's like being held in there against her will, and she's like, I don't belong here, I'm not crazy like these people. And it's just awful. Like, it was really bad. I was reading it and I was like, surely this experience will grow on her and she'll learn that there's nothing wrong with mental illness and that it's just something that needs to be dealt with like a medical condition. But no, she's like bailed out by her parents before her treatment's even over, and she's held in there for no reason, extra time past when she was supposed to be released. And it just, if I had read this book and then I'd had to go in to inpatient treatment, I would have been so scared, upset, I would have felt horrible about myself, I would have felt betrayed by my parents, because that's how P feels, betrayed by your parents. And she uses that after she gets out as an excuse to just run amok and do whatever the hell she wants. I won't even get into the aspect of this where P gets a boyfriend and then she goes off her antidepressants because she becomes happy. I won't get into that. But I do think that that is a whole issue upon itself. And I think that it was never really dealt with properly. Her parents are made into these like villains. Her brother is like, either he is the best or he's the worst. There's no middle ground. He's not very complex. He's not developed. I personally do not recommend this book to anyone with the most remote like relationship or experience with mental health, because I really think that it's very damaging. I think it honestly sets us back. The inpatient treatment, the eating disorder shaming, which first of all, I didn't even like. This book, I can tell that Stephanie Elliott tried really hard to make this book well-rounded. I can tell she really tried to write a good mental health rep book, and I appreciate that she did that. But I have to tell her, in my personal experience, this book is damaging, judgmental, and I think it's poorly researched, to be honest. I don't recommend it. If I know that a lot of people on BookTube do recommend this book, and of course that's their opinion, they're entitled to it, but I really think, as someone with personal experience with this sort of thing, I don't think this is a good book for eating disorders, or mental health in general. I just don't. It feels weird to segue off and to be like, comment, subscribe, but that's what I'm gonna do. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more bookish content. And I will see you next week. Bye.